Welcome back. Thank you all so much for watching. This is Bass Singing Central channel. I'm Matt Fouch, the host of this channel. Today we're talking with Ian Owens. Thank you so much for being here. If you haven't done so, please hit the subscribe button. We don't want you to miss any of the future videos that we release. If you'd like to support this channel, you can do so by ordering some of the gear that we have. The link is in the description, and the picture you see there is a sample of one of the shirts we have. We do have more coming in the future. Ian has been with several groups in gospel music. He's had quite the career. He's doing a fantastic job singing bass, and I know you guys are going to get some great insight from Ian Owens. Thanks for watching.
Ian Owens, how are you, brother?
I'm good, Matt. How are you?
Hey, I'm awesome. I'm doing very well, having a lot of fun during this stay-at-home order time. Been able to get a lot of interviews and videos with a lot of bass singers, and this is for the Bass Singing Central channel. A lot of these guys watching on this channel are guys that are Southern gospel music fans, and there's a lot of guys who are not. And what we all come to this channel for is just bass singing. We all have an appreciation and a love for bass singing, and you've been singing a lot of great bass for
Thank you.
several years now. You've had a great journey, been with several different groups. Before we get into any of the specifics on singing bass, why don't you give the guys watching a little Ian Owens history for those that have not followed your journey, man?
Yeah, gladly. I'm from Mississippi originally, and being from the Deep South, born in 1980, I was really inundated with Southern gospel music. It was everywhere. It wasn't just the professional groups. Of course, we had the groups coming into the churches in the area, but it was everywhere. It seems like there were local groups all over the place. My family just loved it. As a matter of fact, my father, Butch Owens, who sings bass with the Blackwood Brothers Quartet now, he and my grandparents had a gospel quartet back in his childhood. My grandmother, my mama, she played piano. My papa sang bass. Daddy played bass guitar for them, actually. And then as I was coming up, Daddy started his own quartet. He started singing bass, and I started playing bass guitar for him. And my mother had a Southern gospel trio. It was just everywhere. So every weekend we were going somewhere, some little town in Mississippi, and usually my dad's group, my mom's group, and my grandparents' group was all singing together, and it was a lot of fun. So I was naturally just kind of inundated and exposed to the art form, the music, at a very, very young age, and so I love it. Of course, it reminds me of family. It's nostalgic for me from every angle. So it's more than just the music. I mean, it's home, if that makes sense, because it's Deep South Mississippi. It's my family roots and values, and I love it. Anyway, so my dad, as I was playing bass guitar for his quartet, he was a full-time. Well, he was a police officer in Jackson, Mississippi. He retired after 25 years, and he didn't start singing until after he retired. But he took a bass singing position with the kind of, at the time, semi-pro group, the Bible Tones in South Mississippi, which some people may be familiar with. And he asked me to sing bass for his quartet. I was like, Daddy, I don't sing. And a little known fact about me, I didn't sing through school. I majored in classical brass. I thought I was going to be a band director. For me, through school, it was always instruments. I played string instruments. I played brass instruments. That's what I studied. Kind of thought that's what I was going to do. And I said, Daddy, I don't think I can do that, but I'll try. And I did. And making a long story a little bit shorter, about 6 months after doing that, I sang in a common venue with the Cumberland Boys, the Cumberland Quartet, at a South Fork Fish House in McGee, Mississippi. And they had just lost their bass singer, Steve Goforth. They were doing some reorganizing after Opryland closed down, excuse me. And I auditioned at the same time as Michael Means. And he actually got the job. I was 18 years old. I was a little bit young. But about a year and a half later, Brett calls me up and says, hey, you still want the job? And I said, yes, sir, I do. And kind of the rest is history from there. I spent a year and 3/4 on park at Silver Dollar City with the Cumberland Boys. In my first year with them, I was lucky enough to be nominated for Horizon Artist of the Year, along with Lauren Talley and Scotty Inman and a couple other people, which was really neat. let's see, I went on to be with the Imperials, and I stayed with them for about 7 years. And then I was with Ernie Haas's Signature Sound for about 2 years. And now I've been with Sold Out for almost 8 years. So,
yeah. And what a lot of guys may not be familiar is that you and I both are the only two bass singers to have sang bass for Sold Out Quartet. There's only
that's
been
right.
two of us, you and I.
That's right. And it's really neat how our paths crossed too, because we just kind of flopped over each other there for a
That's
second.
right. Yeah. Yeah. There, just as a little backstory for those guys watching this that are Southern gospel music fans, 2012, I think, was the year. There was quite the little carousel of bass singers that year. Is like Randy Bird had moved groups, Paul Harkey had moved groups, I had moved groups, you had, and there was about 5 or 6 different bass singers, and we all just kind of like, it was almost, I mean, we didn't do it, but it was almost like we all just kind of rotated around.
Like we just decided to trade places. Hey, man,
that's right.
I'll do what you're doing, you do what I'm doing.
It was so unique, but it was so cool now, because here's the cool thing. What I love about it is that, of course, the fans are always going to be like, oh, my favorite is leaving. It's not going to be the same. You get all of that. But what's so cool about it is you've been there for 8 years. I've been where I am for 8 years. Paul has been where he is, and Randy's been where he is basically since all of that happened. So it all happened, and then we've all just kind of stayed where we went. And so I look back and say, even though it was crazy and kind of chaotic and kind of weird for those of us following bass singing gospel music, what ended up was what God had. And so we all have stayed where we wanted, where we ended up. So I thought that was really cool.
It really is. 2012, the year of the great bass exodus. That's what we'll call
that. Hey, man, I also noticed that you got a lot of stuff on the background there. And
what do you mean?
I'm looking on the screen instead of into the camera. And I see, so I'm assuming that in addition to bass singing, you're like a comic book guy or something. Fill us all in on that.
Oh yeah, I'm everything nerd. I was nerd before nerd was cool, Matt. Now it's cool to be a nerd. But when I was a nerd, it wasn't cool. It meant what it meant. No, but I being a child of the 80s, I love comic books. I love 80s toys, and I collect them. So I have this man cave, maybe a little boy trapped in a man's body cave, filled with vintage 70s and 80s action figures and toys and collector memorabilia, comic book stuff. Yeah, He-Man, Thundercats, Transformers, you name it, I've got it. So it's crazy.
When are you starting the store with all of your stuff?
Right, it's going to be a museum. It's going to be a museum. I'm not selling my stuff. Stop trying to make me sell my stuff.
What is for those that are into that stuff, before we talk about bass singing, what is the most rare item you have in that room?
Oh heavens. The most rare item I have in this room. I have a Mexican edition, first edition of the actual He-Man figure from Masters of the Universe with the plastic head. And I didn't pay this for him. He's mint on card, and he's valued at about $1,200.
Wow.
That's probably the rarest piece I have, but I have a few rare pieces.
Yeah. Would you say that's also the coolest piece that you have?
No, I think actually some of the cooler pieces I have for me, they kind of step out from the nostalgia, but there's some of the more current recreations. I have some 1/6 scale He-Man figures made by a company called Mondo. 1/6 scale means that they're 12 inches or around a foot, and they're highly detailed and modernized. And to me, those are the coolest pieces.
Cool. All right, man, let's get into what we're all here for, is bass singing. So you've had quite the journey, been with a lot of different groups, but really for bass singers, regardless of who you're singing with, you kind of had the same experience for the most part as far as singing, no matter where you were. Hopefully we've all developed our own style and who we want to be as bass singers and the sound that we want for people to recognize us for. What has been your approach to bass singing, regardless of the group that you've been with, and how you've developed your voice and into the bass singer you are?
Okay, well, I'll say this. because of my roots, what I was explaining earlier, the beginning of my journey, and the lack of training, everything has been a little bit raw and a lot of emulation. A lot of what my ear hears, I've just tried to recreate without the why or the know-how, if that makes sense. Coming up, Daddy Butch, he didn't listen to Southern gospel music unless it was a male quartet. There was no, and no hate to him. It's just not his thing. There was no mixed group. There were no. It was a male quartet, or it's nothing for Daddy. But he's a bass singer, so what do you expect, right? So there's a lot of Gold City. It was a lot of the Kingsmen. It was a lot of early Imperials. The Sherman Andrews, Terry Blackwood years. It was a lot of the Cathedrals, of course. Florida Boys, that kind of thing. And so my favorite, just like so many, was always George. I mean, how can you go wrong with George? And it was so neat to hear Tim Riley sitting down on it and just hearing that chainsaw come through your house and that giant subwoofer he's got mounted on his neck. It's so neat. But what really pulled my strings was George and the way he emoted and the way he delivered a message and how everything was so musical. And being I don't want to sound silly, but being a musician first, because what I learned was instruments. What was important to me was musicality. That was what was important to my ears. Not to say that the other things weren't musical, but that just that melodious, being able to carry a melody. That's why, my favorites, are George and Eric Bennett and people like that. I love somebody that can just carry the melody and sing. So my approach really has always been that first. I want to be able to sing a song. And some of the best advice I ever got was from Eric Bennett when I was with Cumberland. I was very young, and he said, "Don't worry about the low notes. The notes will come. Worry about learning to sing."
Yeah.
And that's stuck out more than any other piece of advice to me. I mean, of course, I adore Jeff Chapman. He's the very best, in my opinion, at what he does. I think he's amazing, and he's not just an amazing singer. He's an amazing person. I adore that. I love all the styles of bass singing, but that melodic presentation, that's always going to be my favorite.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of been my approach.
Yeah. And so when you are doing that and you're going for a certain style of placement, let's say, what type of placement do you use? You hear a lot of guys talking about through your mask. Gene McDonald was on recently and was talking about he's using more like chest and trying to open up his throat. You hear other guys talk about all these different kind of techniques and placements and all of that. What do you use, and what do you feel like works best for the way you like to sing?
Really, Matt, it's a mixture of all of it for me. And when I listen to you sing, I feel like you blend a lot of it as well. And so I think you'll definitely identify with that, because I feel like I end up, depending on what I'm trying to accomplish, I end up blending a lot of it. If I'm trying to sit on the low F, the low E, whatever, and I'm trying to get that heard, I'm putting it here. But if I'm singing a ballad, or I'm singing something that's supposed to be emotionally evocative, it's going to be more here, and I'm going to sing with a little bit less force, and I'm going to sit back and just let the tones resonate in my throat and my chest a little bit more, because it's intimate. You know what I mean? So it really depends on what I'm trying to accomplish in the time. I wouldn't say that I'm the type of bass singer that I'm going to use the exact same placement no matter what I'm doing.
Yeah. And I like that, because I think that especially for the bass singers that are trying to get the message of the song across, you want to be able, you want people to hear, say, the inflection in your voice, or the timbre, and maybe even a little cry or a tear in your voice while
Absolutely.
you're telling that part of the story. And you can't really get that if you're singing the same way as if you're trying to nail, like you said, a low F or a G or whatever your bottom note is, or whenever you go low, you can't get that same feel singing that way when you're trying to get an emotion across of a song that you're trying to get the message out.
Absolutely.
I like how you put that. So at the end of the day, when you are saying, man, okay, like for instance, we've all been kind of off a little bit here, and we're about to go back out. Say you're going to do a concert. What kind of vocal exercises are you focusing on to help get that bottom, that low end back, get that cut back into your voice before you go out in concerts?
Well, at that point, and I've got to clear my throat here because I made the wrong choice today. I'm drinking a peanut butter milkshake. That was ignorant. Don't do that, bass singers.
Good thing you're not singing.
Exactly. Then I'm going to definitely fall back on the advice I've gotten from people like Jeff Chapman, and that is those mask exercises, which I'm sure people who've watched this channel have seen that demonstrated several times. But inflating your sinus cavities, because a lot of what a lot of people who are just starting to sing bass don't understand. They think that, and I know that you'll relate to this as well, because again, I consider you to be focused on the melodic. I mean, you have an incredible low range, great low tone, but you are a melodic singer. You want to emote, you want to connect. I mean, I love the way that you do that. So you'll understand what I'm saying when I say this as well. A lot of bass singers think it's all about the lows, but you have to warm up your high end too, because if your high end's not there, your low end's not going to be there, because all of it ties in together. It's all the same muscle, and you got to work all of it out at the same time. And so much of what's happening is not just the lows sitting in your throat. It's that resonance that comes from your sinuses, and that will make your range more easily accessible. If you can get the air in, whether your placement's in your mask or not, if you can get the air in your face, in your head, your entire range is going to be more easily accessible. And so I start in the mornings with the same Jeff Chapman approach, which he taught me, because I'm blowing my sinuses up, just getting the air in there, clearing stuff out. But then I'm working scales, and I'll start in the top of my range, and I'll sing all the way through the bottom of my range and keep moving down as I warm up. But a lot of times, if I don't have a lot of time, I'll just hum. You know what I mean? Just to kind of warm things up and again get air in my head.
But yeah, and what are the two tips you think would be the best tips that you would give? Maybe you've already mentioned them in what we've talked about so far. Would be the best tips that you would give a guy that comes to you and he's like 20 years old and he's like, man, I've been listening to all these bass singers and I've got a low voice. I want to develop it. And I heard you hit some low notes tonight at the concert. How can I get better at that? Because here's the thing. I agree with everything you said. It's all connected. We got to be able to work our high end and as well as the low end, all of that. But at the end of the day, here's what we gravitate towards as fans of bass singing: the low note.
Of course, absolutely.
That's what grabs our attention, and we gravitate towards that. Even though singing in the mid range and the high range is just as important, or even maybe sometimes more important than the low note. But what would you give a guy a tip or two that's coming up saying, I want to develop that low end? I'm already working on all the other stuff. I want to develop that low end. What would you express to them?
Tips. And I'm going to crawfish a little bit because I know that you're asking about low tones specifically. I'm going to say the same thing that Eric did. Learn how to sing. Just learn how to sing. And as you're working those scales down and you're working into your lower register, figure out how to make your low placement and your low tones sound the same as what's up here. Work the quality down all the way through your range and your register, because that's so important. And I know that's not exactly what you're asking, but for me, when a young bass singer comes up, that's just the number one thing, because it has stuck out the most for me. And so that's what I want to pay forward. Your lows will come naturally with age. Everybody will tell you that. They say you're not even a real bass singer until you're 45, because your vocal cords, they don't stop changing. A little bit of science behind the production of the sound. Most people don't know. short, fat vocal cords make low notes, just like the E string on a bass guitar, or if you have a 5-string bass guitar, a B string. The fatter, the shorter the harmonic, the lower the note. Long, thin vocal cords make higher notes, and so you can work those muscles to kind of take that form on by emphasizing a certain part of your register. So obviously singing those scales down, waking up in the morning when you're most relaxed and talking as low as you can in your lowest octave for the first hour of your day or whatever, those are going to cause your vocal cords to start taking that shape. They're going to be shorter, fatter, more relaxed, making those low notes. That's just the science of harmonics.
Yeah.
And sound production.
I would add to that, like if when a guy comes and asks me, I say to them, sing to the group you're with, blend with them, all that kind of stuff. But if I'm talking specifically about how to help develop the low end, there was a couple things that I found that helped me when I was in my early mid 20s. One of those things was the vocal slides, and just doing scales with vocal slides. And so you just hit the scale where you're starting at and do the octave slide and do it up and come back down, and even go lower than you can actually go. And that, like you're talking about, that helps to develop it. And if you do it over time consistently, it can help to develop your low end, because you are in essence reforming that muscle. Another thing is for guys that are just wanting to work on that low end is, and this is the same type of a thing, but it kind of echoes what you said about, or when you wake up early in the morning and you're just talking in your low tone, is picking a song, a Bible verse, if for scripture, or ABCs, or 1 to 10 or whatever, and just doing it all on the same 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then go down a note, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then go down, or ABCs or whatever you want to do, and just keep going down even lower than where you can actually go, because you got to push the bottom end in order to try to help reform it, develop that muscle. And I think those are a couple of really good things for guys that are kind of exercises. If you do those on a daily basis, not to hurt, obviously if your voice is hurting, stop.
Yes,
Right?
You've gone too far. Well, the key word there is exercise. If you go to the gym and you're trying to build muscle, you're trying to change the way your muscles work and the way they look, the way they act, you're going to do repetitions, and you're going to increase the resistance of those repetitions every time you go back and repeat the exercise, so that you become stronger, you develop them in the way that you're going. And so at the end of the day, it's a muscle. You got to exercise it. Repeating like what you just said, repeating that, and then increasing the resistance, meaning moving lower down in the scale and getting, like you just said, further than you can even go, lifting that weight that's heavier than you can lift, or heavier than you lifted yesterday, continuing going. But all of that will help you to eliminate those breaks in your voice as well. A lot of bass singers don't address the fact that just like high-end singers have breaks in their upper range, a lot of times we have breaks in our lower register. Maybe you can sing a low F, maybe you can sing a low G, but for whatever reason, a low B is just really difficult for you to place. And that happens. And that's going to come with those repetitions as well, and working that entire range down, like I said, and increasing your entire range as a whole, eliminating those breaks.
Yeah, and I do want to add to this discussion a little bit. There's all different kinds of techniques and these guys watch all types of videos on YouTube about bass singing. You'll hear all different kinds of names for different styles. You hear chest, fry, you hear all these different terms and different things. But what I always want to stress is sing, to what you were saying earlier, stay within the range that you are melodious in, and that when you hit the low note, you can produce a nice, full, solid sound. Yet, in my mind, yes, you can buy the greatest microphone ever, or you can have the best sound man ever that knows when to boost all the lows and EQ your mic just right for that 10-second moment. But to me personally, singing notes that you can sing and create nice, full, solid tones with on a consistent basis. Obviously, there's going to be a night every now and then, or a weekend when you're just not feeling it, or something's going on and you don't have your low notes like normal. But for guys that are trying, and I think of it this way, for guys that are trying to cheat this, cheat
Absolutely, of course.
they're using some type of fry or some type of just a growl or type of thing and saying, look at how low I can sing. Look, man, this is just an opinion thing for me. That's not singing. That's
right.
Figuring out how to manipulate in a way to just make a sound.
Well, you allow the diaphragm of the microphone and the subwoofers at that point to create the sound. You're not creating the sound.
Right.
People like Jeff Chapman would say, you need to be making the note before it ever hits the microphone, actually making the note. And that ties back into my ideology, like I was talking about earlier, Matt, because when you come at it approaching bass singing with the same musicality that every other singer in the world approaches singing, which a lot of times I think it isn't always the approach, but when you come and you approach it with the same musicality, you want to show proper respect to every note produced. Don't disrespect the note. In other words, make sure that you are giving every note its due musicality. And so that just ties back, what you're saying ties in perfectly with my ideology, because it just needs to be the best product you can put forward in those cheating methods. And listen, I've been doing this for 20 years. When I started out and I was young, I used a lot of those cheating methods because you sort of, again, just going off of what I was trying to emulate what I heard and going off of my ignorance based on the fact, you don't know necessarily that you're doing wrong. And at the end of the day, some of those techniques did help me to increase my natural range as well.
Yeah.
And not to get a little bit off topic, but one of the unique things about my journey is with Cumberland, Depp wasn't really looking for a specific sound. But when I was only there for a year and 3/4, and when I joined the Imperials, well, I was only the second bass singer for the Imperials in 40 years, and Armand hired me to replace him personally. That's hugely intimidating. But you go into a situation like that, and you are focused more on the sound that came before you than what you're bringing to the table, if that makes sense. And then a little bit the same when I joined Ernie. I went from the Imperials, and there's this expectation of sound that came before rather than what you're bringing to the table. And that's just kind of part of it. That's not good nor bad. It's just kind of part of it, right? And so one of the things I would what?
And then you replace me.
Oh, then I replaced Matt Fouch. And so there was this expectation of sound that came before. Then I was like, why are you smiling at me?
See, okay, pause real quick. I didn't even realize that you had, I knew you'd gone with the Imperials, but I didn't realize you replaced Armand as the second bass singer. You replaced Tim as the second bass singer.
As the second bass singer.
You replaced me as the second bass.
As the second bass singer. So what we can find, and Steve Goforth was the first bass singer for Cumberland. I mean, so really what we can glean from this is I'm second best. That's really what it comes down to. I think I'm going to put a sign back there by my toys that says second best always. No, but when you have such a seasoned sound, you know what I mean? Yep. You're kind of expected to come in and emulate that. And so one thing that I just want to kind of circle back around to with that approach of musicality, young guys, find your sound.
Yeah.
Find your sound, be who you are, bring that to the table. You're going to be happier with yourself. You're going to be more satisfied. You're going to feel like you're creating your music. And that's important for an artist.
I agree with you. And I've enjoyed this discussion. It's been a lot of fun. Is there anything else you want to add for these guys before you share any socials or any websites or anything you want to give to them where they can connect with you?
No, I just would encourage you, like I said, appreciate the music. Appreciate the music. Come at it with artistry and passion, and knowing who you are in the midst of all that, I think is going to give you the most joy for the longest amount of time. I think that would be my bottom line there.
And what I also love about that is that even in that, we can all develop this brotherhood that is bass singers, where we appreciate the music and we appreciate our own styles and our own way of doing things. And like we were talking about, like I said, faking a tone or whatever, talking about that, and that may be your style. That may be the way you have to do it. You like to do it. You want to do it. What we were talking about are opinions of ours for the way that we sing. And that may not be for everybody. But what I love about the fraternity of bass singers is that even though we all can sing different, look at it differently, approach it differently, we're all helping to keep this art form that is bass singing alive, and hopefully we can all do it well and keep spreading the love for bass singers out there. And I love that.
Absolutely. Totally agree.
All right, man, where can they connect with you, man, on socials?
I'm on Instagram at Ian Adam Owens. I'm on Facebook just under Ian Owens, and of course soldoutquartet.com. And that's pretty much it for me.
Cool. Appreciate the time today. Thank you so much, Ian.
Thanks, Matt. Appreciate you.